We're going to have some fun today, chess kids, so buckle up and get ready for some tactical wizardry. Today it's all about two squares, f2 and f7. Why are these squares so important? Well, only the king guards these squares to begin the game. That makes this square vulnerable. And if you don't know what that word means, well, you just got a little spelling lesson. Vulnerable means weak. You've got to pay particular attention to these two squares to start the game. Most of you have already figured this out because at some point in our life, everyone loses to the 4-move checkmate. The 4-move checkmate is, of course, when the queen comes out really early on and we double team f7. There are a million ways for black to stop the mate, but if you've never seen it before, you might just ignore it and then get checkmated and you'll learn a very painful lesson. Hopefully, that happened to you against a good friend and not at an important chess tournament. Any reasonable move here, like queen e7, queen f6, even pawn g6, there's a lot of ways to stop the checkmate on f7. Let's go on to some more clever examples. In this position, you may notice there's an open d-file. White's king is safe and black's is not. In fact, white's f2 pawn is safe because he's got a double defense, whereas look at black's f7 pawn. He still only has the king guarding. That's an important rule. When your king is castled, your f-pawn is usually a little bit safer, although we're going to see some exceptions even to that rule later on. What? Let's say black in this position plays the move pawn to c6. It looks kind of logical, doesn't it? Because when you play the move pawn to c6, you try to get rid of one of white's best placed pieces. But here white has a cool trick based on f7. Why don't you pause your videos and see if you can figure out what I'm talking about. You should always be looking at checks and captures, and the correct move here is a check and a capture, and it happens on the square f7. The problem for black is that when he captures back, now nothing is guarding his queen, white will swoop all the way up, and he's very happy to trade bishop for queen. You might have realized that black didn't have to take the bishop, but if he moved down, now we get to use our skewer trick, because the black king and the black queen are on the same diagonal. Either way, black's queen is going down. Let's take a look at another example on the square f7. This is one that's in a lot of chess tactics books. Here, white has much better development than black, and he has a shocking move. This is a pin, but as we learned from a previous video, it's a relative pin, not an absolute pin. So, crazy as it may seem, we actually can move our knight. Now, why would we be willing to give away our queen? Well, it's all about f7. Yeah, you could take with your knight, and that would fork the queen and the rook. But remember, you sacrificed your whole queen to get this chess position, so winning a rook back is not quite going to cut the cheese. What we need to do is capture with our bishop. This poor black king only has one legal move. Pause your videos and see if you can figure out how white ends the game. Well, this time the dark squared bishop can't be the hero. He can't quite get past his own pawn to get to g5. We need a different piece to be the hero, and it's the knight. Knight to d5 is mate on the spot. Not only do we check the king, we take away the king's escape route. When I first saw this trick, it was one of my favorites when I was a chess kid. 3 minor pieces swarming like a swarm of bees around that black king. I actually got to use this exact idea in a blitz game I once played against a friend. Notice the similarity in this position. I have 3 minor pieces out. Black has 2. And in this position, knight takes pawn actually was the move I played. It's this time, it seems even simpler than the tactic I just showed you, because if he captures my queen, it's mate and 1. Bishop takes f7. Now my opponent realized what was up and played a return trick, pawn to d5. Here's his idea. If I take the pawn, let's say with my pawn, he has made me block my own bishop. Then he'll take my queen and he'll laugh at me because my bishop can't quite get to f7. But I had a return trick in store for him. I captured the pawn with my knight. Now it still looks like my bishop's blocked. So he went ahead and took my queen. Why was I willing to give away my queen? Pause your videos and see if you can figure out the forced checkmate that Funmaster Mike played here as white. Well, you probably realize I've got to move my knight to reopen my bishop, but I don't want to go back to some lazy square like c3. Black can actually guard his f7 pawn by playing bishop to h5, and there is no checkmate. I have to give check with my knight. There's 2 checks, but only one that works. If you take this pawn, black will take with his queen, and his king will have what's called a flight square. He will run away. So the only winning move is the shocking, the amazing knight f6 check. Black only has one move, which is to capture, and even though I'm down a queen and a knight, we have our famous bishop takes f7 checkmate. I've got 2 more cool positions for you, both played by the legendary Bobby Fischer. Bobby Fischer was white in this chess position at a US championship. Now it looks like black's f7 pawn is safe. After all, he is castled, but Fischer took it anyway. Bishop takes f7 check, and black resigned on the 10th move of the game. If he doesn't take that bishop, the knight will just hop in for a devastating fort. But if he does take the bishop, black's diagonal here is so weak that the queen takes the place of the bishop, and there is no good response to queen takes rook. Black's going to be down a boatload of material, and against Bobby Fischer, that's all she wrote. One last example, my favorite example of Bobby Fischer doing a nasty tactic on f7. Here, Fischer was playing against Sammy Reshevsky, another legend of American chess. We've got to set up the tactic on f7. Fischer first played the move e5, and this poor knight had no good square to move to. He had to go back to the square e8. Now it looks like f7 is perfectly fine. Here, there's only one attacker, which is this bishop, but there's 2 defenders. How could one possibly defeat 2? Well, Fischer wasn't the world champion for nothing. He looks at captures that most mortal people would gloss over. He played bishop takes f7 check. Seems impossible, but here's the idea. If the rook takes the bishop, now knight to e6 is a genius trap of the black queen, because this pawn on d7 is pinned. If you take my knight, you lose your queen. Look at that. So Reshevsky could have captured with his king, but now the move knight to e6 would have happened anyway. Oh my goodness. The queen is still trapped, and the only way to save her is to take with your king, but after queen to d5 check, this poor king has to come on a walk. And you're going to have to trust me when I say that after pawn to g4, there's an eventual checkmate of that black king. Always, always, always look for your checks and captures on f7. And if you're white, be careful of f2. We didn't look at any examples of that, but f2 is just as weak as f7. This square can make or break your chess game.